Been a while. Welcome back, everyone. Sorry for the 6-week hangover. I apologize. Let's get into Gittin because we last left off. I think the last thing we talked about was Birchas Kohanim in the middle of Sota, right? So that was about a month and a half ago. So we're back. I wanted to do a light version of Gittin. I didn't want to do anything heavy because we hadn't started any sugya yet. We haven't been together for Gittin yet. And usually I like to do an introduction. And the introduction that I want to do actually doesn't come from Maseches Gittin. Right? Just like if you remember when we did Yevamos about a year and a half ago, the introduction that we discussed from Yevamos was from a Gemara in Chulin. Right? I like to do things off the beaten path. So I wanted to pick a different Gemara that talks about a topic in our Gemara. Okay? And that topic we're going to introduce by way of the Sefer HaChinuch. Right? As you know, whenever we discuss a new mitzvah and get, right, the divorce bill that a man gives his wife is actually one of the 613 mitzvahs. It falls into the category of a mitzvah that most people would rather not want to do, but it goes into the category of, well, if you have to do it, then this is how to do it. So it's not a preferred mitzvah, obviously, but it's a mitzvah nonetheless that you have to do, right? Almost like chalitza and a bunch of other mitzvahs that are just there in case you have to do it. So I wanted to start off with the Sefer HaChinuch, the way he introduces the reason of why the Torah says that we have to have this concept of divorce if the couple wants to separate. Or in the times of the Gemara, if the husband wants to separate. Okay, we know that back then is different than the way it is now, right? As we've been through this, we're up to Daf Lamed Dalet or so already, right? We've done over a month already in Gittin, and we know that a woman does not necessarily have to agree to consent to a husband who wants to divorce her. He could do it against her will. Enter Rabbeinu Gershom, 1,000 years ago. He put an end to that, amongst a few other things like polygamy. So we're grateful for Rabbeinu Gershom. But before that, if you read the sugyas in the Gemara, you'll notice that the husband did have the will, if he wanted to divorce her forcibly. So let's start off. I'm going to read the first few lines of the Sefer HaChinuch, then I'm going to veer to a Gemara in Sanhedrin that the Chinuch brings down. So the Chinuch says the following: Misharshe HaMitzvah, the reason why we have this mitzvah of giving a get, Lefisha ha'isha nivres la'ezer Adam. So I just want to give a disclaimer, as I have done before many times, that this Sefer HaChinuch, amongst others we've seen, is certainly not PC. It's not written for today's society, and it would certainly not be promoted and discussed in in today's times. But he wrote this book about 900 years ago, so things are a little bit different. So I'm going to explain this mitzvah through the lens of the author, we don't know what his name is, of the author of the Sefer HaChinuch. And, like I always do, my disclaimer is this is not me, I am just reporting. Okay, so now that I got that taken care of, the Chinuch explains, Lefisha ha'isha nivres la'ezer la'adam. Why, if you look in the Bible, with the creation of the woman, right? How is it described? It says, Esol Ezer Kenegdo, right? Man, Adam was alone, and God said, hey, he needs an Ezer Kenegdo. He needs help, okay? So he calls it Azer Adam. Lefisha ha'isha nivras la'ezer ha'adam. The woman was only created, I don't want to use the word only, I'll just use the word created, was created to help Adam. V'hilo ke'echad miklei chemdaso. Okay, and she is like a kli. She is like a vessel, right? The way we would explain the word kli. right? She is a vessel for him, and he brings a proof. Uke'inyan sha'amru zichronim lebracha, the way our rabbis describe it at length in a very lengthy Gemara we're about to see in a minute. Ein ha'isha kores es bris ela lomi she'asa kli, right? That a woman, okay, makes her covenant or her bris with the one only who is the one responsible to make her into a vessel. Meaning that the woman is ready to say, okay, you man, the one that I'm marrying, because you make me into a vessel, which is another way of saying when she starts to procreate, when she starts to have children, it's through the help of the man. So it's the woman that complements the man, right? Therefore, she is considered making a bris with him. She's making a covenant with him. And the Gemara goes on to say another line, the Chinuch goes on to say another line, Va'achar shekain, and if that's true, that she is what, right, that he is there to make a bris with her, Va'achar shekain, haya mirtzono baruchu shekol zman sheyakutz nafsho b'kli hazeh. So, if the assumption is that the woman is this kli, right, of the man, then it goes along to say that anytime he is disgusted with this vessel, now again, we're comparing her to a kli, okay? So if he doesn't want it anymore, okay? If he wants to exchange, if he is sick and tired, if he, for whatever reason, decides one day not to be interested in this vessel that he owns, so therefore, the Sefer HaChinuch says, he could let her leave his house, and again, if she doesn't want to, he could force her, because the woman, again, I hate to say it, I'm just reporting, as I said 3 times already, a woman is created in this sense to serve the husband, and if he decides that he doesn't want this kli anymore, then he could, as we say, kick her out. Okay. Now, I want to veer to the Gomoran Sanhedrin because this term comes from a Gomoran Sanhedrin, and I want to review this Gemara because it's very insightful, okay, to help us understand this whole methodology of how the Chachamim, get their views of divorce and when is the right time to do a divorce and what's, so to speak, the Gemara has a say in who gets to call the shots over here, and why is it that the husband could force her to leave? Okay, so the Gemara starts off. If you have a Gemara, it's in Sanhedrin Daf Chaf Bet Amud Bet. Okay, if you look at the Mishnah, let me just open it up. I'm sorry, it actually starts on Chaf Bet Amud Aleph. So if you have a Gemara 21a, the Mishnah actually discusses nothing of woman or divorce. The topic on Daf Chaf Bet, toward the end of the second perek of Sanhedrin, talks about, the Mishnah says that you can't, you have to treat the king, the melech, right? That's the topic. The topic is the melech. So the melech, the king of the Jewish nation, is someone who we have to respect, and we can't just go on his horse. For example, the Mishnah says you can't ride on his horse, you can't sit on his chair, you can't play with his stuff, basically. You can't see him when he takes a haircut, you can't see him naked, you can't see, right? There's a certain, what we call today, right? You have to have Ema, right? Today, we don't have this concept anymore of Malchus, right? Today, all we do is we make fun of our royalties and dignities. Back then, they actually took it seriously, and that the king was someone who everybody had to be scared of, right? You couldn't go where he went, okay? He was regarded as real royalty, and everything that he owned was off limits. So the Gemara starts off by saying, one of the other things that was also off limits of a king was his wife. Now you're going to think, okay, of course, right? If a king was married to a woman, right, you had no business, right, taking her. So I'm reading over here from the Gemara. Amar Yaakov Amar Yochanan Avishag Muteret l'Shlomo va'asura l'Adoniyahu. Okay, we're going to talk about the story in the beginning of Malachim. If you remember the very first chapter of Malachim, okay, Kings 1. This is the Haftorah, I believe, for Chaye Sarah, right? It talks about the story where King David was getting old, and he needed a young girl to warm him up. Okay, so they called all the virgins in the area, and they bought a girl by the name of Avishag. Okay, so the Gemara says that Avishag, even though she belonged to King David, so muteret l'shlomo v'asur l'Adoniyahu. Shlomo would be allowed in theory to have Avishag, but Adoniyahu, which was King David's other son, right, the one who was not so good, the one who wanted to rebel, if you remember, right? So she's actually okay for Shlomo. Why? The melech haya umelech mishtamish b'sharbito shel melech, because Shlomo was the king, and a king could use the other kings, right? It was his father, so he could use the sharbit, right? The so to speak, the staff of his father, but basur lo Adoniyahu dehed yodu. But when it comes to his other son Adoniyahu, so the Gemara says that the Adoniyahu could not at all, right? Adoniyahu at all could not go at all to Avishag. Okay, so that's how the Gemara starts off by saying. So now the Gemara says, what's going on? What's the story? Avishag Mahi. What's the story of Avishag? It says in the beginning of Malachim, v'hamelach David zaken ba b'yamim, right? It says that King David became old. Vayomru lo avada v'yavakshu. Right? The Gemara quotes the pasuk that he asked his servants, I need someone to warm me up. Uksiv vayavakshu nara yafa. And it says that they requested a nara yafa. Uksiv v'hanara yafa ad ma'od v'atihi lamelech sochenes. It says that Avishag became a sochenes, a companion to the king Vatishartehu, and she served him. That's what the pasuk says. So now the Gemara dives a little deeper into the story and says the following: Amra Ninsabin. She woke up one day, said Avishag to King David, and she said, let's get married. So Amra la asiratli. King David said, I have a problem. What's my problem? My problem is that I have too many women already. What does that mean? There's a rule that we're going to see in a second that the king is only allowed to marry up to 18 women. Okay, that's the maximum. So he was at number 18 already. So he can't marry another one. So therefore, when Avishag requested David to marry her, he said, sorry, I can't do. Okay. Now, Gemara says, well, that's funny. Amrole, so she said back to King David, Hasre lagan v'nafshe l'shalma nakit. Right? She gave an expression which basically says, if a ganav, okay, if a ganav has nothing left to steal, right? The way Rashi explains, Kishaganav chaser she'enu motze makom lignov, if the thief stole everything already and has nothing left to steal, then machzik atzmo ba'anava ki ishalom. Then he appears like a man of peace because he says, I have nothing left to steal. So look, I'm kosher, right? So basically, Avishag is criticizing King David and says, no, don't think you're so self-righteous. The reason why you don't want to marry me is because you're too weak, right? You can't have relations with women anymore, right? Don't think that you're so holy and that you can't marry another woman, right? So that was like a real, punch in the face to David. So the Gemara says something only that the Gemara could say. So what happened in the story? Amraluhu kirili Batsheva. He said, oh yeah, you think I'm impotent? So bring me Batsheva, Uksiv, and the pasuk says, "Vatava Batsheva el Hamelech HaChadera," right? So the pasuk says that Batsheva went into the room with David, and what did they do together? Amar Yehuda Amarav Ba'osa Shah Kincha Batsheva B'Shlosh Esrei Mapot. Okay, so basically, it said that he had relations with Bathsheba 13 times, right? And she needed 13 cloths to wipe herself after each time. So we're not going to get into the details, but the bottom line is King David said, you think that I'm self-righteous and don't want wife number 19? That is not true. The truth is that what? The truth is that I am very capable, but I don't want another wife because I'm prohibited. So I wanna veer off again. I want to go back to this concept because we're not in Sanhedrin yet, but I don't know how many people know this obscure law. But the truth is there's actually a mitzvah or a lo taseh in the Torah in Parshas Shoftim that says that a king is not allowed to do three things. A king can't have too much money, okay? Too many horses, and too many women. All right, horses, money, and women. Those are the three no-nos that a king is prohibited. So if you look, the chinuch actually says in mitzvah number 501, the chinuch says that what is the reason? What is the reason why you can't have too many women? So Valzen Emar, I'm reading from the chinuch mitzvah 501. So usually the chinuch gives the reason why we have this prohibition. Chinuch says, I don't have to give you a reason because this is one of the very, very few examples in the Torah that the Torah actually gave a reason. Okay? Ki hanashim mesiros lev ba'alehen. Because too many women will lead a man astray. Right? He says that they will seduce him, right, to do basically what's not fitting for this man to do. Right? Whatever is not right for him to do, they will convince him one way or another to do. And there's going to be competition, right? You could imagine having 18, right? Having 18 wives, there's all kinds of competition, right? And the chalkolokos and their words, right? And he's never going to listen to any of them because there's going to be just too many opinions. And what's interesting is that the Gemara in Sanhedrin, one daf before this, like I said, says this is why the Torah or the Chachamim said that the Torah doesn't like to give reasons, because here the Torah actually gave a reason. And Shlomo, believe it or not, took the reason and he said, I know better. Torah says you can't marry 18. I'm Shlomo HaMelech. I am the wisest person on earth, and I will marry more than 18. And if you know the end of the story is that, according to a lot of Mefarshim, they actually seduced him for Avodah Zarah, and he also didn't listen about too many horses, right? The Torah's second example of a reason it gives, right? If you have too many horses, you're going to end up going back to Mitzrayim. Shlomo says, I know better, it doesn't apply to me. And the Psukim and Malachim said that he actually went back to Mitzrayim. So that's why the Chachamim said the Torah does not want to give you reasons. Because as soon as you give someone a reason, right, there's laws and then there's the reasons. If you give someone the reason, then he'll try to figure out a way to get around the reason and say it doesn't apply to me. Right? This is human nature. So therefore, sometimes we're better off not knowing the reasons. So that way we just stick to the rule and not try to be what we call an uber chacham. Right? But that's what Shlomo's downfall was. And that's exactly what the chinuch over here says, that for whatever reason, the Kabbalah is that 18 women, I mean, we may laugh at this today and say, oh, like 18, like that's a ridiculous number. But okay, as they say, it's good to be the king, right? So you can get 18, but you really can't get any more. V'lo yoter, v'afil hen ka'Avigail. The chinuch says even if they are as tzaddikas like Avigail, Shahisat Tzidkanios, who's Riza Vatova, she was great. Okay. And the chinuch ends off by saying that if you do take number 19, it says the king is Chayiv Malkos and you must divorce her. Interesting. Okay. So the way to get rid of this is by divorcing number 19. So that's what the chinuch says. So from the negative in the chinuch, it sounds like too many wives are problematic, but how about one wife, right? One wife, right? One wife sounds like the way to go. And I want to read a Rambam because the Rambam discusses why one wife, well, obviously we know why one wife is what we ultimately want, but the Rambam discusses the relationship that's created when you have your one wife and she's your ohev. The Rambam in Pirkei Avos, in the beginning of Pirkei Avos, we have a famous Mishnah that says Yoshua ben Prachia says Aseh lecha rav uknei lecha chaver. Okay, so the Rambam says there's 3 categories of friends. Okay, there's something called Gimel Minim Ohev. The Rambam says there's 3 kinds of friends that you have: Ohev Toeles, Ohev Menucha, and Ohev Mila. He says one of them is just a friend, and he goes on to explain that it's a friend that you don't necessarily need to get along with except for financial reasons. For example, if you have a partner, you may not necessarily be very friendly with him, but you have this relationship where you need each other for business, and that's the extent of your friendship, right? He actually quotes Aristotle, the Rambam does, and he says, Aristotle said, the friend is one. So you have your friend, right, like your partner, right? And that's, that's all you need. The second friend, he said, is a friend for pleasure, right? You have a buddy that you hang out with, you talk about, you see him in shul, right? You go to his house, right? You go to the bar with him. That's someone that you two get pleasure from each other. You could talk to him in confidence. He could give you advice. You could give him advice. That's what the second madrega of a friend is. The third type of friend, he says, is what they call a ohev. What's the word over here? Ohev ma'aleh. He says that's the highest form. The highest form, his example, is like a student teacher, where they each need each other, and each being without each other, it's like yin and yang. They don't complement each other. He says when you have 2 people where you know everything about that person, and that person knows everything about you, then that's the greatest level. He says the words of the Rambam is v'ohev malahu sheyeh tavat shnehem v'kavanatam l'davar echad. He says the desire of both of them and their intent is to complete the circle, is for one unit. And I want to help you, right? They call it in science, I think, symbiosis, right? It's good for you and you are good for me, right? We each complement each other. This is what Yehoshua ben Prachia is talking about in Pirkei Avos. He's talking about someone, that's why it says the word kneh, right? When we say, right, we don't say acquire a friend, right? You would ask someone, did you make a friend on the bus today? Did you make a friend in school? We would say the word, right? We would say the word aseh. To make a friend is aseh lecha chaver, like aseh lecha rav. But what is kneh lecha chaver? Why are you acquiring someone? Why aren't you making a friend? He says, because the level of friendship that Yehoshua ben Prachia is talking about is this high level where you each need each other. And therefore, you're not just making one, you're actually acquiring one. You have to go out of your way and actually do what we will call something like a kinyan, right? That is the level of a Talmud and a Rav, that they each need each other. And that's exactly the same thing as a husband and wife. Okay, this is a nice Sheva Brachos Bart for anyone who needs one soon. But that's exactly why it says Aseh lecha Rav, and the Kinyan is by the Chaver, right? And the same applies, is not just a Rav and a Talmud, it's also a husband and a wife, who each of them complement each other and form one solid unit. So that's when they're getting along. That's when there's one wife or two wives, not 18. So that's what happens when there's too much, and that's one of the reasons. The other beautiful thing I saw on this note is there's a famous Malbim in Parshas Vayetze. The Malbim talks about when Yaakov was working, right? Remember the story, right? Lavan put Yaakov to work. He said, you want to marry Rachel, you have to work another 7 years. And there's a very interesting pasuk. The pasuk says, Vayavod Yaakov berachel sheva shanim, right? It says that Yaakov worked for Rachel sheva shanim, right? Then it says, Vayihiyu be'einav kiyamim achadim. But the pasuk says that although it was 7 years, it felt like a second, right? It says it was like a few days. Why? So because he loved her so much, it felt like 2 days instead of 7 years. So the Malbim asks a very famous question everybody should have wondered when they see this pasuk. When you really, really want something and you can't wait for it, it feels like it's forever. Most people, right? If you're counting down something, if you have 1 week left of school, right? Whatever it is that you're looking forward to, when a person usually looks forward to something, each day seems like a year. Here, it's the opposite. Here, he really wanted to marry Rachel, and the Torah goes out of its way to say that these 7 years felt like 2 days. So how is that true? So the words that the Malbim uses is fascinating. He says, he says, this was not a love after something. If I love something, if I love a food, a particular food, if I love ice cream, does that mean that I actually love the ice cream? No, it means that I love myself because of the ice cream, right? The ice cream is just an object, right? I love it, but it doesn't mean anything to me because I'm going to eat it. So the thing that you love is not the ice cream. The thing that you love is yourself. And that's what the Malbim says. He says, right? Because if you really desire something and you can't wait for it, if it's just a regular object, then yeah, each day will feel like a year. But if you love someone because of who she is, if you love someone for who they are, then the day doesn't feel like a year. It's just the opposite. A year feels like a day because you're striving and you're looking forward to it. So when he loved her, because loving, and this is a very deep philosophical point, that loving an object, he says, like in my case a minute ago, the ice cream, you don't really love ice cream or whatever your favorite food is. You love yourself. You love yourself so much that you can't wait to eat it. Can't wait to satisfy your hunger. Right? Not that object. So when he loved her, it just wasn't temporary. So that's another beautiful, also nice, Dvar Torah, but more in line of what happens when you have this union where, a husband, a wife, and she's not turning him against, right? She's not driving him, out, and she's not, seducing him to do other things. So here's a nice, example of what a perfect union in theory is. So we went a little bit off the path regarding, let's go back to the Gemara in Sanhedrin, if you don't mind, because remember the story? The story was that Avishag, right, that David HaMelech says, you think, right, that I'm old and can't handle another wife. The truth is, bring me Bathsheba, and whatever he did with Bathsheba, and that proved that he was, right, that proved that he was capable of relations. So why are we learning this story? Because the Gemara is going to make a point now about the concept of gerushin, about divorce. Because what happens in this story, Amar of Shaman bar Abba, Bo ure'eh kama kashin gerushin. He says, come and see how severe the Chachamim looked at this concept of divorce. Shaharei David HaMelech hitiru lo liyichud, v'lo hitiru lo legarish. Now, again, David was at the point where he was at number 18, okay? A potential number 19 was in the wings. Okay, Avishag would have been number 19. So what did the Chachamim at the time let? They let him do yichud with Avishag, right? Even though yichud's not permitted. But they weighed the two. They said, he needs to do something. We have to do something a little bit wrong. Should we have him do yichud with number 19 but not marry her? Or should we remove number 18 and replace number 18 with Avishag? Those were the only two possibilities. So from the fact of the story that they didn't want him to marry Avishag, just do yichud, that proves that yichud, as bad as it is not as bad as divorce. That's why the Gemara says, Bo ure'eh kama kashin gerushan. See how difficult it is to divorce someone. The last thing we ever want to do is a divorce, right? So that's why we said we'd even do what we call yichud pnuya. Okay, at that time it was a derabanan, and right. So now there's a whole side discussion about whether you are allowed. I mean, the assumption is obviously you're allowed to do it, but can you do it for no reason? So the Gemara now is going to quote, the Gemara in Sanhedrin is now going to quote a couple of more sources, okay, that actually come up in our Gemara all the way at the end of Gittin. The very last daf of Gittin, daf tzadi, which a lot of people claim the way the Gemara should have started, right, is reasons to divorcing your wife. So the way the Gemara should have started was the last daf and this Gemara that we're about to quote now actually happens to be from the last daf, but we're going to read it now. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Kol hamegarish es ishto rishon afilu mizbeach morid al abdemos, right? That if you divorce your first wife, the mizbeach cries, right? The Marsha explains that the mizbeach was the tool that the karbanos, right? What karbanos? When a woman gives birth, so she brings a karban, right? So the mizbeach is a partner, so to speak, in this marriage. So therefore, the mizbeach feels bad. Shenemar v'zos shenis tasuk sus dimes mizrach Hashem b'chi ba'anaka me'ein od panos al mincha lakachat tzon miyadchem. I'm just reading a little bit quickly. It's a pasuk from Malachi. V'amartem ama al ki Hashem heid beinecha u'beineshes norecha asher ta bagda ba v'hich chavata v'eishes brisecha. Basically says that cover the mizbeach with tears. For his no longer showing, right, that he wants your offering from your hand. Okay, so that's a Gemara that we're going to see also again at the end of Gittin, like I said. Then the Gemara goes on to say other things about divorce. It says, Amar Rav Yochanan v'Item Rav Elazar ein ishto shalad meisa ela im ken mevakshin mimenu mamon. It says that a woman only dies if they ask the husband for money for a certain charity. Okay, we're not going to discuss this Gemara. It's very hard to understand. We'll go on to the next one. From Rabbi Yochanan, Kol Adam Shemesa Ishto Rishona, if your first wife, okay, dies, Ki'ilu Charav Beis HaMikdash B'Yamav, it's as though the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Okay, and it brings a pasuk in Yecheskel, which says, Ben Adam, hineni lokeach mimcha es machmad einecha b'magefa lo tisaped v'lo tivke v'lo tavu dimascha uksiv v'adaber la'am b'boker v'tamas ishti. Yecheskel says that Yecheskel's wife died. Ba'erev uksiv hineni machalas mikdashi gunuschem machmad einechem. Okay, so it's Yecheskel is comparing the death of his wife to the Beis Hamikdash being destroyed. That a man's wife is as precious as the Beis Hamikdash was for the Jewish people. Okay, going back to heading toward the bottom again of Sanhedrin Daf Chav Beis. Amar Alexandria Kol Adam Shemesa Ishto B'Yamav Olam Choshech Ba'ado. Anyone whose wife dies, it's as though there's darkness, and it brings a pasuk. Okay, let's skip to the next one. Next one's a famous Gemara. Amar Barachana Amar Yochanan Kasha Lazavgan Kikriyas Yamsuf. Okay, this is a Gemara we actually had at the beginning of Maseches Sota about 2 months ago. That says that the creation of a shidduch, right? Because the most common interpretation is that it's very unnatural for two different people, right, to get along, who come from different backgrounds, and the fact that nature, right, was turned upside down, and these people could actually have a relationship is like Kriyas Yamsuf, right? Kriyas Yamsuf also was a unnatural act, right? Water tends to flow one way, and right, the water just doesn't split, so it's also an unnatural act. So that is also Gemara says Shenemer Elokim Moshiv Yechidim Beisa Motzi Asirim Bekoshros. Right, that it says that that he brings prisoners into prosperity, but it really means that this is like right, this is like bringing, right, this is like taking prisoners out. So okay, that's actually a part we won't talk about now. I'm getting to one last Gemara I wanted to talk about before we continue with the Chinuch, because the Gemara on the last line of Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph says Amar Rab Shmuel Bar Nachman. There's a very, very deep thought by Shmuel Bar Nachman. L'kol yesh tamura. He says, and everything we have, there is a substitute for, right? You could substitute every single thing in the world. Chutz me'eshes ne'urim. The only thing you can trade in is your eshes ne'urim, is your first wife, or what we call your first love, right? Everyone has a special place in their heart for their first love, and you can't get it out of you. Shenemar ve'eshes ne'urim ki tima'es. The pasuk in Yeshaya says, and a wife that you had when you were young, can she be rejected? It's a lashon bitmia. It's right. He's asking the question, ki tima'es, can you just reject this wife who you had, your first wife, right? Your first love. Masni la Rab Yehuda la Rab Yitzchak Brei. So the Gemara tells a story and says the following. Gemara says that Rab Yehuda told Rab Yitzchak his son, Ein adam motza koras ruach elo meishto rishona. That a person, right, a man, can only find koras ruach, which is peace, right, calmness, right, only from their first wife. Shenemar, it says, pasuk in Mishlei says, Yehi makarcha baruch. It says that let your makor, your fountain, be blessed. The samach me'eshes ne'urecha, right, and have joy with the wife of your youth. Okay, this is what Rabbi Yehuda is telling his son, Rav Yitzchak. So Rav Yitzchak says, Kigon man. So, hey, father, who are you talking about in this pasuk? Amar lo Kigon imech. So Rabbi Yehuda got very romantic, and he says, I'm talking about your mother. Right, very nice. So one more line. So the Gemara says, Eini. Gemara says that's not true, because Fahamakri le Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yitzchak Brei umotzi ani mar mimaves as ha'isa sher hi mitzudim v'charamim. Because the Gemara goes on to say, on a different occasion, Rabbi Yehuda was telling his son Rabbi Yitzchak a pasuk in Kohel. That's a famous pasuk we read every year on Sukkot. It says that there's one thing which is worse than death. What is worse than death? It's a wife who, right? It's a woman whose heart is traps and nets. Someone who's very conniving, someone who gets angry, someone who's always there to trap you. For Amar Lo, and his son said, Father, who are you talking about in this pasuk? And guess what he said? Kagon man, Amalek kagon imech, your mom. So the Gemara says, hold on. The other story, he likens her to right, this is his wife of his youth, right, the fountain of happiness of his life. And a minute later, the Gemara tells a story that who is the worst woman in the world? Someone who traps you. And the son says, who is that? And the father says, well, it's also your mom. So we seem to have a bit of a contradiction here. This is one of the more humorous stories in the Talmud, I will admit. It goes in the top 5. So the Gemara says, I will answer the question as follows. Okay, we have what they call Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde scenario over here, because mitkaf to kifi, because the truth is she is angry, she's difficult, but there's a big but. Ibure ma'avra b'mili. She, at the end, she gives in. She kisses and makes up. So on the one hand, she is more bitter than death. She's worse than death. However, she's also a source of joy and the fountain of his youth because she is a first wife, right? So depending on the time, it's very hard Gemara to understand. Ben Yehoyada says that everybody has different personalities in them. And when someone is excellent and great, so they also channel that sometimes for the opposite. You could be very good in something, but that talent that you have, unfortunately, gets channeled for the wrong thing. That's the Ben Yehoyada's philosophy on that. We're not going to discuss it now, but speaking of psychology and philosophy, I was wondering to myself, right, the Gemara discusses this concept of your first love. So the Gemara says that this is the ultimate, right? This is the penultimate. No matter how many women you have, you're always going to remember your first wife. So I saw an interesting article, came out actually last year. It's from, right, these things, we've been doing this for a few years already. So the people in the audience know that I like to look at, modern thinkers and how they, how they match up with the philosophy or the psychology of the Gemara. And a lot of times you see that these ancient concepts really are true today. And people write articles about them and they think that they've discovered something. But as we know, as I said many times, and I'm having thoughts of George in my head now, may he rest in peace, that everything comes from the Gemara. So I found an article in a magazine called Psychology Today, written by an Israeli psychologist named Aron Ben Zev. Okay, it's called "Would You Rather Be Someone's First Lover or Their Last Love?" Oh boy. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs because he says something, he points out something very interesting. It's exactly what the Gemara says. He says, religious aspects aside, from a psychological viewpoint, it would be natural to assume that those who marry their first love are likely to regret missing out on better or at least different romantic options. Research on the topic indicates that when a negotiator's first offer is immediately accepted, he's more likely to think that he could have done better, and therefore less likely to be satisfied with the agreement that those negotiators whose initial offers are not accepted immediately. For example, you're bidding on a house, let's say, right? And the asking price is $1 million, okay? And you say, okay, $950, and the guy takes it in 1 second. So you have two options. You could either be excited that you got $50,000 off the asking price, or you could have said, hold on, the guy gave in so easily, I could have said $920, and I could have saved another $30,000. Most people, unfortunately, I think the answer would say, wow, he gave in so easily, right? He gave away the store. I could have, right? I could have asked lower. So rather than be happy that they say 50,000, they're upset that they couldn't have got it for another $30,000 less. The same is true, I think, that the point that the psychologist is making. He says, if we don't know what the other option is, then, right? So as he says, and therefore less likely to be satisfied with the agreement than those negotiators whose initial offers are not accepted immediately. In the same way, lovers may experience a powerful sense of regretting the romantic road not taken. Contrary to this expectation, however, a YouGov study indicates that people who marry their first love are more likely to still be in love, to have never thought about breaking up, and to be certain that they will be their partner forever. A key reason for these results is the powerful impact of first love. Look at that. Sanhedrin Chaf Beis. Unbelievable. A major advantage of marrying your first love is the great romantic profundity stemming from a shared history of positive interactions over a significant period. Indeed, Christine Prolax and Pollack, blah, 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 found that marriages with an initial high and stable level of marital quality are likely to maintain this high quality over a long term. They therefore noted that this trajectory group is okay. One interesting paragraph I have to read. One main flaw in marrying our first love seems to be the issue of regret. Okay. However, we should distinguish between regret and curiosity. Regret involves sadness concerning our past behavior, whereas curiosity expresses a positive desire to know something. Curiosity could be fulfilled in various ways that do not negatively impact the relationship. Indeed, it is not something that can be fulfilled once and for all. Rather, it's an ongoing attitude that's often conducive to our well-being. If, for instance, we seek to fulfill our curiosity by having a romantic affair, this curiosity is unlikely to cease after having one such affair. One would probably seek more. Okay, you understand. And then he ends off by saying, he quotes someone, he says, you can find women who have never had an affair, but it's hard to find a woman who had just one. Okay, I'll leave that alone. I'm not going to go on forever. But you see this concept that the psychologist took. And again, it all comes from our Gemara. So I thought that was a little bit interesting. I want to, so the question is, why are we bringing this Gomoran Sanhedrin? Right? Sometimes you go on these tangents and you forgot where you got, and you forgot how you got there. So we quoted the Gomoran Sanhedrin because of this minchas, because of the Sefer HaChinuch, right? Remember what the Sefer HaChinuch said? The Sefer HaChinuch said the next line in the Gemara, if you're following at home on 22b on top, it says, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Unya mishmei derav isha golam hi. A woman, again, I'll give the same intro that I said in the beginning of the class. This is not certainly PC today. It wouldn't fly, but this is how the Gemara says it. A woman is a golam. Right? Usually when we talk about a golam, we talk about someone who's not too bright, but a golam in the words of the Talmud is something that is raw, right? It's not the golam that we think about in Prague. It's something that, right, the Mishnah in Kalim talks about a kli that's unfinished, right, is a golam, right? It's raw, it's raw material yet to be fashioned. So Isha Golam he, the Eno Koret says bris elalami sha'asa kli. This is finally the Gemara, the ending of this topic, which the Chinuch said the whole reason of get is because the woman was created as a vessel for the man. And this exactly is the Gemara that he uses to show that. He says that a woman is unfinished and only becomes finished when she has a relationship with the man, because the pasuk says, Ki bo alayach osayach Hashem tzva'oshem. The pasuk in Isaiah says that your maker is your husband, Hashem tzva'os shemo. So I thought that was a beautiful way of explaining where the Chinuch got this Gemara from. And before the Gemara, we saw all these various discussions about women and divorce, and when to divorce, when not to divorce. And of course, we spoke about first love. So I thought it was cool how we got a little bit of everything in this introduction. But I want to go back, if I may, to this Chinuch, because the chinuch in mitzvah, how we started mitzvah for what number was it? I'm sorry, mitzvah 579. Okay, the chinuch ends off by saying that uminatam hazeh, I'm in the beginning of mitzvah 579, and because of this reason, what reason? That a woman is here to serve her husband, and if she doesn't do the job correctly, so then the husband could send her out. So therefore, the Gemara says, Shafilu hikdicha tavshilo yachol legarsha. There are those opinions, and this is one of the Gemaras all the way found at the end of Maseches Gittin on Daf Tzadi, that there is one opinion, Beis Shammai, right? Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, Rabbi Akiva. What are the reasons why you could divorce a wife? One of them says, even if she burns the kugel, right? Now, I heard a very, very beautiful interpretation on this. The way we view reason sometimes needs an explanation. Meaning, we could look at something and we don't know if it's what we call a siba, a reason, or is it a siman? Okay, for those of you who know the Brisker method of learning, there's a famous chakira called "How do we view something when we see it? Is it a siman or siba?" I'll give you a great example that I thought of today. It has to do with economics. Okay, everybody knows that when there's something called the 2-year and the 10-year, and when they invert, we call it the yield curve inverting. Okay, that's a sign of a recession. So the yield curve, if you're following economics, know that for the last 6 or 7 months, the yield curve has inverted, right? Where the interest rate on the 2 is higher than the 10, and they crossed. And that's a sign that there's going to be a recession coming up. Okay. So the way to view it, the way I view it at least, is it a reason? Is it because when they invert, is that the reason why? Or is it a reflection? Is it a siba? Is it a siman? Is it a reason why there's going to be a recession? Or is it a simmon? Or that's not the reason, meaning the recession doesn't happen because of this. It's just a reflection. When these two things happen, it's a reflection that there is a recession already in place. So knowing this chakira between siman versus siba, the way the Mishnah says that you could even divorce your wife if she burns the kugel, that's not a reason for divorcing your wife. God forbid. We would never have an opinion that says that you could just let her go. There's a whole discussion whether you're allowed to divorce your wife for no reason or not. Maybe we'll do that some other time. It's a machlokes, the Rambam. There's a whole discussion on that. But one thing that they could agree on is that it's certainly not recommended. But in terms of burning the food, that's not a reason to divorce her. That's what we call a simmon. Meaning, if it bothers the husband so much, then he should look into whether this marriage is for him or not. That doesn't mean that if she burns the kugel the next day, right, she gets her walking papers. It means that there's something in his head that's saying, you know what? I married this woman. It's not working out. And it's bothering me that she can't even cook me a meal. I don't think this marriage is for me. That's what we call a siman as opposed to a siba. All right, I think those out there, Hamei bin Yavin. Anyways, getting back to the Sefer HaChinuch, he says, "Klomer b'nei davar katan achar she'eino lo ela kekli yakar shebebayit." Again, the Chinuch in his un-PC way is describing her as a kli. So if you go to the store and you buy something, right, you buy a hammer, and the hammer doesn't work after a day, then you don't want it. So too over here, if this is not working out for you, the husband has the option to divorce his wife. On the other hand, right, this is not just kli, this is someone who's created in the image of God, right, to help us. And Azer Kenegdo, Einayim Liros, Vaznayim Lishmoa, B'nefesh Sichlis, Ein Ru'oi Lahotziu L'sholcho Ma'alav. You really need a good reason. You just can't return it, right? This is a human being. This is someone created. It's Tselem Elokim. Uki-inyan she'amar hakasav ki matzah ba'ervas davar. There has to be an erva davar. There has to be a sexual reason involved. Aval mikol makom divrei hakol kishematzav ba'davar gadol shera'i lagar sheminatam shezacharti. But if you do find a reason and it's a good enough, compelling reason, then you have to divorce her. Then he actually talks about, I'm just going to skip a little bit. He compares it to other religions, like we're not actually sure in the Catholic branch of Christianity whether you're allowed to get divorced or not. It's actually a machlokas amongst the scholars whether you're actually allowed to divorce your wife if you are of the Catholic faith. It's not such a simple thing, but we're not going to talk about that now. But he says we're not like other religions that doesn't permit it. Okay? Anyways, so the way he ends off by saying, the amnam tzivatanu haTorah b'shalchenu ota, if it does come down to the fact that you have to divorce your wife, you can't just say, honey, we're divorced. You need something substantial. You can't just say, you can't use words, right? We've been learning the last month about a get and how it's written and what it's written on and all these technical details that the get has to be viable, right? It has to be a piece of paper to serve as evidence. Why? Because it could be a stumbling block, because it could backfire if we don't use a divorce document. Why? Because if all we need is for him to say you're divorced, so if someone cheats on her husband, and she could say, okay, he divorced me, and now she marries another man. No, you need a written document. Now that you actually need a scribe to take out the parchment and to write it and to get all the details about her name, right? Today's daf, we talked about you can't just use her name, we have to use her nickname, what she was known by, what she is known by, all these myriad of details. You need a real shtar. So he actually ends off, thank God, on a positive note. He says you have to be so careful and you have to write this get and get everything right. He says, and if it takes a long time, it may be beneficial because he may calm down after he spends an hour writing this document and says, oh my God, I can't believe I actually wrote that. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel sometimes. And Gemara actually in Bava Basra in the last parak also discusses how the Kohanim had a high temper and they had to write a special kind of get. So, right, because once a Kohen divorces a wife, it's pretty bad, right? So that's the way I will end on this. It's not really a high note, I'm just making that up. But at least we tackled the introduction, and next week we'll get into hopefully one of the more lumdish sugyas, because we have a parak full of tikkun olams, and there's a lot of different lot of different topics coming up in this parak. All right, questions, criticism?
Hi, Bezalel.
Uh-oh.
It's very interesting. I think the point you made at the end, I wanted to say earlier on, which is that the Torah should be applauded for allowing divorce when other religions didn't.
Correct.
And the idea in America of irreconcilable differences makes people forget that there was a time when people could not get divorced.
Correct.
But the Torah, centuries earlier, did allow it.
Yep. One of the few. Yep, that's certainly true.
And I had one question. I've heard that sort of the concept of marriage and divorce is merely an analogy to Hashem and Bnei Israel.
Yes, there's a whole book of that. It's in the Treyasar. It's the beginning of Hosea. If you remember, Hosea was told to take a prostitute for a wife. And if you look up the Gemara in Psachim, I think on 87, 88, Pezayin, Peches, it says the whole Hosea never happened. It was all an analogy of God and the Jewish people. So you nailed it. If you want to look at that Gemara, it's exactly, it's the beginning of the 8th parak of Psachim Ha'isha. That whole thing talks about, I think it's Daf Peches talks about how exactly that Hosea never really happened. It's all an analogy, because why would he tell a prophet to take a prostitute for a wife, right? and to have two children, one lo ami, right? Lo ruchama. So that whole story is exactly what you're talking about.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.